now joining us is a baseball legend, and I'm really excited to have him on this show. He's a Hall of Famer, a two-time Cy Young Award winner, and one of my favorite players as a kid. Tom Glavine, thanks so much for coming on. How are you this morning?
I'm great. How you doing?
I'm doing really, really great. So, Tom, the Baseball Hall of Fame ballot was just released this year, and some of your Mets teammates from that great 2006 team could be joining you in Cooperstown. I want to start with Billy Wagner. He's been on the ballot for many years now, and it looks like he may finally get in this time around. He didn't quite have the star power of, say, a Mariano Rivera, but he really was one of the most dominant closers ever. Can you talk a little about him as a pitcher?
Well, I think he should have been in a few years ago, to be honest with you. I think when you look at Billy's numbers, if Mariano was the standard, and obviously he is, I think Billy's numbers are right there with Mariano's, and some of them might even be a little bit better, other than the total number of saves. And to Billy's credit, he said he was playing his last year. He went out and had a great year and stayed true to his word. He walked away and he went home. So, I think that when you look at his body of work, he could have certainly pitched more and accumulated more saves, but wasn't, again, what his life plan was, so to speak. So, like I said, he stayed true to his word and went home to his family after that last season. But I just think when you really dive into his numbers, they're certainly right there with Mariano's, and I think he's a guy that hopefully gets in this year. But I think much like Freddie McGriff, another former teammate of mine, I think he should have been in by now, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I agree. And let's talk about the interesting case of David Wright. It's his first year on the ballot. He looked to be on a track towards Cooperstown until spinal stenosis sadly ended his career. Now, every serious baseball fan knows that the odds are stacked against him, but do you think he'll at least get enough votes to remain on the ballot and get reconsidered down the road?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I think that, when you're starting to look at Hall of Fame guys, it's different, right? And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. Myself included, maybe sometimes, but the days of 300 game winners, 500 home runs, 3,000 hits, those benchmarks I think are going to be harder and harder to achieve, particularly the 300 wins. I'm not going to sit here and say nobody is ever going to do it again, but I certainly would bet against it. So it's forcing people to dive into numbers a little bit more. I think you look at a guy like David, and I think immediately a guy that kind of comes to mind in certain respects is Andrew Jones. I think when you look at Andrew's body of work for the first 10 years of his career, it was phenomenal. He certainly was on a trajectory to go to the Hall of Fame, and then he started to have some injuries, and things started to go south a little bit, and there was a quick fall off. So I think David is similar in the sense that, look, he was one of the best players in the game. He was a guy that teams didn't want to let beat them, and so he commanded that kind of attention when you played against him. Unfortunately, injuries started to happen, and his career got derailed too soon. But I think he's a guy that people are gonna take the time to look inside his numbers a little bit more closely, and see what he actually was for that short body of work, even though, again, unfortunately, the injuries kind of slowed things down for him.
Yeah, and your center fielder, Carlos Beltran, he was an amazing five-tool player who got more than 46% of the vote last year. He needs 75% to get inducted. Has another 9 years to get there. Seems like he's in good shape, but he is linked to the Astros sign stealing scandal of 2017. Do you think we'll see him gain traction, or does that scandal hurt his chances?
I don't think there's any question that situation, scandal, whatever you want to call it, is going to have some effect on his standing. Now, I still think he's a guy that certainly is worthy of Hall of Fame consideration. Again, I'm not a historian, so to speak. I don't sit and dive into guys' numbers a whole lot. I just kind of go more by what you saw, how they were in terms of their era, so to speak. I happen to play with and against Carlos, and look, he was one of the best players in our generation. So, I think he certainly is going to continue to gain traction. I hope that Astros thing doesn't have anything to do with it. I mean, if we start going down that road, then I think we might have a hard time with a lot of guys, right? I mean, look at it. It was an issue. Baseball dealt with it. I don't think it's the kind of thing that Carlos as an individual should be forced to pay a bigger price for than anybody else did or has. Look at his numbers, look at his body of work, and decide whether or not he's worthy. And I think he should continue to gain traction.
Truly a great all-around player. Let's switch gears and talk about the current Mets. 2023 was obviously a letdown. They have a new manager now in Carlos Mendoza, who's never even managed in the majors before. What do you think we can expect from the Mets in 2024?
Well, a manager side, I'll get to him in a second. The biggest thing for the Mets is they got to stay healthy. I don't
Yeah.
know what's happened there the last couple of years, but you certainly look at that team the last couple years on paper, and you think, okay, here's a team that's got a chance to be in contention, maybe win the division. And 2 years ago, they were right there in good position, and they kind of faltered down the stretch. The Braves were able to catch them, and that was the end of that. But this past year, like it seems so many years recently, they just can't keep guys on the field. And I don't care who you are. If you're not getting a steady dose of your starting pitchers going out there taking their turn, or if you're not getting a steady dose of your everyday lineup going out there and playing together, this is a tough league to compete in when you don't have your full arsenal of players. So I think that's been the Mets' biggest problem more than anything else. Now, as far as the new manager is concerned, listen, it's being a manager for the first time is tough anywhere. I think it's obviously even tougher in New York. I don't know that you can find a tougher place to be a first-time manager than New York. It's a difficult place to be. You're held accountable. You're asked a lot of questions, and you're asked some uncomfortable questions at times. So, it'll be interesting to watch. But again, I think the bigger issue is finding a way for the Mets, whatever their 25 or 26 man roster is to try to keep as many of those guys on the field as much as they can. That's been their biggest issue.
Time will tell. Hall of Famer and 300 game winner and one of my all-time favorite pitchers, Tom Glavine. Thanks so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Head over to ONNJ.com for the latest news and sports anytime.